Baltimore has always been a quintessentially Catholic city.
The priests were the authority. Whatever they told you to do, you did.
The city has its level of corruption. Sister Kathy exemplified this spirit of compassion and kindness.
I have never had a teacher like that before.
She was murdered our senior year, and it's always haunted many people in the community.
Our mission, we were driven to find out who hurt Sister Kathy.
People pop up from 45, 50 years ago who say, I have a story I'd like to tell you.
I believe Kathy Sesnick was killed because she was going to talk about what went on at Keo.
There's an on-the-record public story of what happened to Sister Kathy, and then there's the world beneath.
The police department and the state could provide protection for the priests.
There were other people brought in, local business owners, politicians that were part of this network.
I can testify that over 100 victims have been abused.
Time is getting short for us to be able to figure out what happened to Kathy.
My father said to my mother, you want to know why I drink? Because we killed a woman and we put her behind the shop.
He said, see what happens when you say bad things about people?
This goes bigger and deeper than we can imagine. The story is not the nun's killing. The story is the cover-up of the nun's story.
Well, good afternoon. How is everyone? Thank you for the ones that have joined us this wonderful Sunday afternoon. You could have been anywhere, but you chose to be with us. Hello, everybody. Hello. How are you doing, special guest?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
I am well. Thank you for joining us. Anyone that isn't aware of that voice, that is Mr. Angelo, the Lightning Viper. Today, he's been so gracious to come and talk about his story. Now, I know that some people may have heard his story, maybe some haven't, and I have heard bits and pieces. And now is an opportunity. We wanted to take this opportunity to we had a private conversation where I spoke as referring to myself as an activist and not an advocate. And he says, I think you might short sell yourself a little bit. Maybe I do. Today, I'm here. I am here to advocate for a resetting of the community, because I find that not just this community in which we partake in, and then the communities that overlap us, it's that the whole internet in total, is in this point where children and victims are hypersexualized, and that there is a real promotion of the perpetrators of these crimes, sometimes chronic and serial in nature, right? So today we have I have a programming laid out, and it's kind of fluid. It may change. It usually does. But I want to give everyone put some prayer hands in the chat, pardon me, for Mr. Angelo, please. And then we're going to dive off into it.
For every survivor too. Every survivor.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hello, Act Right, Dutchie, Lori, I'm sorry. My eyes are a little bit blurry today. Casey K, yeah, Mom. Brooke Shelton, Archivist Tina, Tilly, Raindrop, Lickety Split, Rapper, hey buddy, how you doing? Lips, Dutch Girl, Bye Felicia. I don't want to miss anybody who's here. Honest Rain, thank you for joining us. So what we want to do is I wanted to move through. You guys know I love the terminology Tarantino. This isn't
from Night Owl.
Night Owl. Good to see you. Good to see you. This isn't really a situation that I feel that can really do justice by Tarantino in this thing. So I want to start kind of chronologically, and I want to run this thing linearly, right? Hey, Megan, good to see you. Thank you all for joining us. So let's talk about the facility. This is St. Aloysius, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so St. Aloysius was the old terminology, an orphanage. I think that loosely people of our generation still will call these homes that name. Isn't the terminology nowadays more like school for boys or school for girls or whatever?
Yeah, school for wayward children is kind of
Okay.
like the term that they use now.
So it says St. Aloysius Home in Rhode Island was a long-running orphanage and residential care facility in Greenville, Smithfield County, right?
Yes, sir. Right on the line,
Okay.
actually.
Operated by Roman Catholic Diocese of Providence, the facility eventually closed in the 1990s. The orphanage and its history are known for a few specific points: abuse allegations and investigations. In recent years, St. Aloysius Home has been at the center of significant scrutiny regarding historical, that's a powerful word, historical child abuse, child sexual abuse. Following investigations into the Diocese of Providence, multiple former staff members and priests were credibly accused of abusing children at the orphanage. Pardon me. Survivors have detailed harrowing stories of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse occurring there. The Diocese Accountability Report. Comprehensive details regarding the documented allegations are publicly available in the Rhode Island Attorney General Diocese Report. I have that pulled up. We may or may not dig into that today, but I certainly will link it in the chat. Act right. I swear I have the monetization turned off on this.
I have no issues with you making anything off of this. I think it's important what you're doing.
Well,
and if they want to pay you for that, then accept it.
I definitely went through and turned it off. It is off. I don't know why. Please, thank you, Ackright. Thank you for your contribution. Today, this is more about this is all you can see right here. It's off. I don't know. I guess maybe I haven't turned off super chats. Please hold on to your dollar bills today. But again, Ackright, thank you so much for your contribution. So let's go ahead and dive into it. At what age were you put into the Aloysius home in Rhode Island?
2.
At the age of 2. So you don't remember quite naturally being put there.
No, I remember it all, actually.
Do you really?
That's the sad part. Yes. I don't know why I remember it. I remember the court hearing. I remember the parental rights being terminated voluntarily by my biological dad. I remember my mother being on the run from the law, and her rights were just terminated based on absence. I remember going into the orphanage at the Y unit, and I remember aging up there until about 12 years old.
I see. So can you kind of give us a rundown of the infrastructure in the way that the children are sort of categorized there or housed?
So pre-adolescent, before you have puberty, you're on the Y unit, which is the very top floor. It takes a special elevator with a key to get up there. So only key holders, which are the staff that work on the floor, the priest, the nurse, and the food people, were allowed to have keys that would access that floor. And that was called the Y unit or youth unit. Once you exhibited signs of puberty, you were moved to the 3rd floor, which was the preteen, pre-adolescent unit. Those were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those had 8 units, all named after hockey teams: Pirates, Bruins, Hawks. And you were grouped by ages there as well. There was typically a 2-year difference between any one group. Interactions between the groups were limited unless it was during physical training time, spiritual time, or school. Other than that, you really didn't interact with the other groups too much.
In terms of the leadership roles there, what was the ratio of children to educators or spiritual guiders or whatever?
So in the early years, our educators were the nuns, and that was a separate housing structure just outside the doors of the actual home itself. And it was another building, a smaller building, I guess some would call it, because the building itself is a mansion that was converted. So you could call the school what a mansion would have on their property, like what would you call it, like an in-law suite or something like that?
Mother-in-law suite.
Yeah, but it was a bigger house. It was like about the size of an average house, a 4-bedroom house. And there were 4 classrooms and a library. And those were run by the nuns for the first year or 2 that I was there. And then it switched over to independent educators because Rhode Island had passed some sort of a law that required them to have actual educators, certified teachers to teach classes in order for us to get credits.
Okay.
And then you had staff. So I would say there was a 1 to 10 ratio.
1 to 10. When you think about, now, of course, this is the priests, they lived on property. Is that correct?
The priests that were assigned to St. Aloysius lived on the property. And they also had an apartment inside the church itself, which was contained within the housing system. So you'd have your chapel, I guess you would call it. And then to the left of the chapel or the pulpit, if you're looking at the pulpit straight on, to the left would be a housing unit for the priests and or guests.
So let me ask you this. What did the access look like to the children by the priests after hours? Like, I'm guessing there isn't any really set 9 to 5. It's 24/7 care,
Correct.
Air quotes. But I'm guessing that after a certain hour, the general citizenry that just was employed there that went home, a lot of this abuse, just thinking logically, a lot of this abuse probably happened after hours, right?
The abuse happened 24/7 at any given time that the priest or his subordinates wanted to do something. They had access to any amount of children that they wanted. And many of the people knew what was going on and did nothing to prevent it. In fact, some of them even participated.
And so that's where you really have the corruption, quite naturally within the facility, because I'm sure there's a lot of fear-based activities going on, like priests that maybe, nuns know or whatever, but it's ruled with an iron fist, basically. Like, if you say anything, I'll say you were a part of it too, or whatever you can imagine is the response.
No pun intended. Father McIntyre had supreme control over everything that happened there. Wow. He could make or break a person's career. He had that much power. He had more power than the bishop, which is strange. Wow.
So it must have been hard growing up as a kid, being involved. I can only imagine. Clearly it was hard, but you're involved in scenarios with these priests and these upper level in the facility there to see them outside of the abuse of yourself and your peers. What was that like to see them holding a mass and then knowing what they do behind closed doors? Like, what was that like?
I never really understood religion young. I really didn't know what it was. I kind of knew that there was a belief system and a lot of emphasis on punishment if we were not following the scriptures that were being read to us. And it was also used as a kind of like a pass for the abuse that was being done to us. It was like, I think in one instance I remember Father McIntyre saying something along the lines of, if you weren't here for my purposes, God wouldn't have you here, or something along those lines. It was very odd to hear come from somebody, because like all we're really seeing is a guy in a robe with a type of scarf around him, kissing and blind, blessing wine and kissing breads and giving people, their daily affirmations and things like that. But aside from that, we as youths, until probably we were 10 or 12, didn't really understand what the religion was.
As an adult, current day, is it triggering? Is religion triggering for you in a way? Like,
organized religion triggers me, and I think that's a lot of why I write the way I write. I'm a spiritual person. I do believe that there is a bigger thing out there than me and in the world itself, and I want to meet it when I leave this realm. But I don't believe in organized religion to the extent I see most of it as a corruptive, do as I say, not as I do organization, and that bothers me, which is a lot of why I write the way I write, and the way the music is designed to make you question organization of religion, where they're sitting up on pulpits and preaching these things while making tens of millions of dollars and really not doing anything fundamental with it.
I think that's sort of the drawback for me when it comes to, real, like, and I'm in the South, I'm in the Bible Belt. Here, there's, either a liquor store or a church or a gun store on every corner, and
yeah.
And in a lot of places, there's literally more churches than there is a pulpit, right? People come from other areas into the church for whatever reason. Maybe it's their family church, but they live outside of the city where it's located. But for me, having had just your run-of-the-mill organized, religious experience, I can't begin to sort of delve into the deviant nature of what you went through. Now, it's the question in that statement is, why do you believe there's such an issue with the Catholic Church? Because I'm not so naive to think that Baptist or Episcopal or Lutheran churches haven't had a situation in the past, but why is it so widespread and vast in the Catholic Church? What's your take on that?
I think the biggest hit for the Catholicism is the fact that they don't allow the priests to marry or have relations, and that is also man-made. A lot of people say it's the way the church was supposed to be intended. It really wasn't. Catholicism itself didn't have the money to support families, so they made a rule that disallowed them from having families. And I also believe that they really shun away from female priests. I don't know why, but that is also another problem with Catholicism. I firmly believe that if priests were allowed to marry and allowed to procreate and allowed to be male or female, I think that the abuse would probably still happen, but not on the scale that it has over the last 100 years. So the other problem I see is the diocese itself and the leadership, the bishops and the Pope, strive very hard to sideline victims and to just rehabilitate these priests under the guise that God will heal them from their plight, and somehow that will make everything all well and good, but not while you're leaving the victims behind. So the victims don't get justice.
And somehow to the church, that's good enough.
To the church, they've ingrained the belief in their doctrine that is that satisfies God's word, what God would want.
So let me ask you this: just as easily as the Roman Church implemented celibacy, and let's be clear that for some unexplained phenomenal reason, celibacy, it's a breeding ground for deviant behavior, right? I mean,
I think the evidence shows that it is.
it is just a crazy breeding ground. Now, what's interesting about that is that you have such a widespread chronic serial problem with not only just children, but it's spoken about pretty heavily in the Bible about same gender stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have these priests that are crazy hypocrites, but they're also child offenders, and offender, to take it to an even deeper, sicker level, they're child offenders of the same sex, right? So
Yes.
it is definitely the proverbial wolf in sheep's clothing, right?
Yes, and I believe that most of the priests do that because they're fearful of impregnating a female if they were to abuse a female.
That's
Because
an
that would
angle.
leave a larger evidence trail for them. It's easier for them to cover up what they're doing if there's no children involved in that sense.
And then they, out of fear of being identified as an abuser of a child, you're not leaving that footprint behind. Like, okay, we have a girl in our care, and she's pregnant, and there's only adult male influence. There's no other boys running around here. There's only priests and bishops and so on and so forth.
Correct.
Hey, Nick, how you doing? Okay, so I want to move forward here, and I want you to run down to us historically what the statute of limitations in Rhode Island used to look like.
So before I turned the age of 18, and at the age of 18, the statute of limitations was 7 years from memory of the incident. So for me, because I didn't know what it was, but I knew that stuff was happening to me that wasn't allowed or something. I guess again, I had the mind of a child, but I knew all of these things, and because I had already made statements to police at 7, 8, and 9 years old, by the time I hit 18, I was already past my statute of limitations.
Now, I was thinking about this while we were talking before this segment. This is really, it's a dynamic that is even almost hard for me to verbalize. But so let's imagine, this is the good guy system, right? What it's doing is it holds victims to a line and a measure of truth that you're not getting from these religious leaders, right? So let's imagine, you said from date of memory. Let's imagine that you have some extensive psychotherapy at the age of 50, and that you unlock that memory at the age of 51. Now, how does the court prove of year of remembrance?
That I don't know. I think it would come down to testimonies, psychological evaluations, and lawyer arguments. Because that's our biggest component as victims to get justice. And let this sink in for a moment. Our biggest component is fighting the lawyers to hold the predators that they're protecting accountable. They're the ones fighting us.
And you can only do that with truth.
Correct.
Wow, there's a lot of moving parts in the whole thing, and feeling like I'm unqualified, I start to feel more.
We do have a lot of good advocates on Rhode Island's House of Congress. Mrs. McIntyre's own sister was in a home, the sister side of St. Aloysius, and things were done to her there that were being done to people in the boys' home. she's one of the biggest advocates and proponents to trying to get these bills changed. That's her there. And just to give you a little history, I have a shitty history on this platform. So while I was going to testify with this lady, people from YouTube were contacting her in advance about me and making a bunch of ludicrous, slanderous statements, which had no viable verification of proof, to try to prevent me from testifying before this committee.
And we spoke about that in email briefly, and you had made mention that I'm not everyone's cup of tea, and nor am I. And my response to that is, I think, should just be sort of standard operating procedure, is that when it comes to topics like this, you don't have to like someone to identify, observe, and appreciate that they're a victim that's speaking out, right? Like that in and of itself is yet another, it's sort of the carryover miscarriage of what's already happened to that person, right?
It's reliving my abuse all over again, which now, I mean, I have developed, and I have a very supportive wife, and I have very strong, mature, powerful children. And when I look at those things, nobody can hurt me with my abuse anymore. No.
That's it. If you've worked through that, it's always, for me, it's always like when people on the internet try to shame you with what they believe is your darkest day, it says more about the author, right? It's like, if you think that my darkest day and I haven't worked through it and it's shameful, what that means is that you would be shameful and that you wouldn't be able to work through it. So it identifies to me through the infantile behavior, it identifies to me that I have grown exponentially, right? So, and one of the things also that one of the dynamics here, and we're going to kind of lily pad hop on it as we go through this thing, is that there is a complete sense, it's sensationalized, right? Kids online and victims, they're hypersexualized, right? If we don't like that someone embarrassed us or called us a silly name, what we want to do is we want to sensationalize things that have happened to them or to people related to them or whatever. If there's public knowledge of a situation where, and it's not just sexual abuse, it's abuse all across the board. But what we have is we have people that will hyper sensationalize them. But what bothers me more, I don't like when someone says, "Oh, you were whatever," but it wasn't of a sexual nature. You were a victim of whatever. But then when you have the people that will come here and say, "Oh, for instance, Angelo this, Angelo that, or Nicolina this, Nicolina that," when people have the fortitude to come forward and talk about these things, right? Now, let's just round it down to 100 people, right? Out of 100 people, there's 30 of you, the statistics say there's 30 of you women who have been assaulted. And then there's varying statistics that say that upwards of 10 to 15% of you 30 women have been victimized again subsequent to that, right? Now, what we have actually is 130 so people. That means 40 of you in here have potentially been abused, whether it's from a family member, a neighbor, a priest, whatever it is. And that those numbers are staggering, right? They're absolutely staggering. And that you understand that there are toxic people here who get great joy out of helping you or thinking they're assisting you in reliving your sexual trauma, right? Sandy, it could be. I just know historically, I've always heard that 1/3 of women, and it could be even more than that. But what we also have is this phenomenon of false reports, right? We have false reports where women use this alleged deceitful abuse as a weapon, using the court to weaponize that. And then at some point in time, the court finding out, or detectives finding out, well, it didn't actually happen, right? And that phenomenon, which is not actually that phenomenal, that phenomenon leads to other women not reporting. And so that's the real phenomenon, is men and women who are abused in some form or fashion, who don't later go on to report it because they haven't worked through it yet. It's still shameful to them. And I can't identify that shame, right? I don't know how that works. I'm not discounting it or saying that it does. I identify it, right? So, Angelo, you there?
Yes, sir. I was listening to you make a very valid point.
So we come to this part of the segment, and you and I talked about it, and you very poignantly pointed out the fact that this was your original letter and report, right?
Yes, this was what I was going to read to Congress.
Okay.
Not knowing, I didn't know who else was going to be there.
Okay.
So I tried to do a very logical, not from a place of anger, not from a place of hate, statement as to why the law needed to be changed. And I thought it was very well written, and it was. I mean, they posted it to their congressional website. Then I see the lawyers from the Catholic Diocese, the lawyers from the Boy Scouts, the lawyers from St. Mary's, the lawyers from St. Aloysius, all speaking before the victims.
Tell me why that was problematic outside of your initial letter to Congress. What's problematic by allowing the people that defend predators to speak first?
I think it put the victims in the shadow, in the bench, and made us come from a place of defense instead of offense. I have no issues with the lawyers for those entities speaking, but I felt like we're the victims that brought the case to the forefront in the first place. We should have first speak. Let them defend after we speak and make them look even more reprehensible. Like, I definitely want them to speak. I want them to speak after we've spoken so that they can make themselves look like horrible human beings. I understand they're lawyers and they have their jobs, and I get that. But let them speak trying to defensively defend a position of abusing children.
Right. Now, I want to talk about a phenomenon really quick. We didn't discuss this, but when it comes to, I believe wholeheartedly in the foundational aspects of criminal justice. I don't really care too much about the civil side because I think a lot of that is hogwash. But when it comes to the criminal side and the proponents or components rather of that, right? So you have scenarios where you will have private defense attorneys who will, a lot of times they will use as one of these bells or whistles of their resume, they'll use the fact, well, I was an ADA prosecutor for 10 years before I moved over here. And what that means to a logical mind is that for 10 years, you operated as the long arm of the law, and that you put, for instance, sex offenders in prison, and that it was your duty, your civic duty, to make sure they got the maximum. Now somewhere there's a change in ethics, right? And now usually because of money or a failed reelection or whatever it is, these guys whose job as the long arm of the law now move over to private criminal retainer, which means now they get paid to keep the same people. Imagine a ADA put somebody in jail for 20 years and he got paid by the state to put him there for 20 years. Somewhere the lawyer has a flaw in his ethics, and now he's over here and he is defending criminals. Let's say the same guy gets out of prison and he gets in trouble again. And guess what? Now the same guy who got paid to put him there will now get paid to keep him out, right? You have the same phenomenon when it comes to lawyers going the other way, right? I was a private defense attorney for 20 years. And then magically they see the light and now they want to work for the long arm of the law. So understanding that a lot of times these things are so skewed that the real loser is the victim almost every time, right? Now, we also
and Nicole makes a good point too.
What was it? I'm in the chat.
So she said for 10 years they weren't able to be hired by a firm or stand alone and lived off the public funds. They get paid. Prosecutors get paid no matter what, whether they're doing the right thing or not. And one key takeaway is the prosecutors work for who? They work for the state.
The state.
The very state that placed thousands of kids into the dungeon and jail cell of pedophiles.
Right. And that when you look at this widespread issue with historically the way kids were taken away from families, let's just use, and I know in your experience, your father, he gave up his rights. But let's speak about the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of children that were removed from a family. They're removed from a family, and this is where it gets jaded, because maybe they're removed from a family where they're being neglected, or they're witnessing this, that, or the third, or they're being abused by someone who says they love them. And then they're ripped away and they're put into Aloysius, and now they're for a lifetime until they age out, they're being sexually abused in all sorts of different things, right? It's a jaded system. Now, I understand that with time comes the evolution of this system, but it's still happening today. It's still happening, right? Now, I want to point out that Mr. Angelo was very upfront, and he said, now listen, this report to Congress, it's vastly different from my spoken verbal testimony to Congress, in that there was no opposition here. He got to sit down and he got to basically lay out his experience of abuse, right? Then you fast forward to this great opportunity. It starts out as this great opportunity to exercise your voice as a victim. But what it turns into is more of what we see happening on the internet, right? It's let the people who defend the abusers set the stage, and then we're going to allow victims to come in and they have to testify under the shroud of what the voice for the offenders say. And so that's the difference between scoring 30 points in practice and scoring 2 points in the actual game, right? I think that it's completely expectant that those be so vastly different, right? I think that also is the way that a logical mind can qualify a victim, right? Because I know I've heard stories of people, saying things happened and they actually didn't. And I think that is one of the beyond a reasonable doubt things that the defender of the offender tries to portray, right? Like, well, these kids this, and these kids were wayward, and these kids were this, and then let the kids who are now adults come in and talk, and their experience and their abuse has already been downplayed. And so they're just kind of left to their devices, right? And that it's the complete removal of all sensibilities, right? These are supposed to be civilized humans, right? And they're actually, you see, it's much the opposite. So, do you want?
And you said you're not an advocate. See that? So I told you undersell yourself.
I think that's
what we need.
I think that I fall into what the internet says, right? It's like, when you go to the police department and you're appointed an advocate, they have some schooling, and they probably don't say the F word or the S word, or they probably don't cover something different and have a good time doing it. Like, that's just, it's what their life is advocacy, right? And so I think that to lean on the safe side of it, I've always just said, you know what, I'm an activist, because there was a time where I thought I was advocating and someone said, no, you're not, bro. Look at your history, or look at this. You're not an advocate. You're an activist at best, right? And you're probably not even a good activist. And it's scenarios like this that force you to think outside of the box. And then I find myself growing in a way while Angelo is sharing his story, right? So do you want to read this right here? Or can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay.
So this is, obviously I had the support of my wife and family, and I had time to sit and think. So I'm thanking the representatives, because we had just gotten, I think it's Spears and Agilia into office, because we had to have this many people just to get the bill on the floor. So I'm thanking them for taking a very brave step, because what they're facing and what we're facing is tens of millions of dollars from the entities that are fighting this law to make us look like evil, vindictive people trying to put old men and women in jail. So these people are standing up for us adults now who were tormented, abused, raped, and left hungry at times. A chance to face our abusers that stole our childhood and our innocence and our security. People paid by the state to protect us. And I went in, explains, I went into state care at 2 years old. It's an ingrained memory that even when this letter was written 4 decades later has never left my memory or my soul. For almost a decade, I was sexually raped, molested, abused, food withheld, clothing withheld, and privacy withheld in an orphanage called St. Aloysius, run by the Catholic Diocese, supported by DCYF. DCYF stands for Department of Children, Youth, and Families in Rhode Island. I'm one of the hundreds of children in Rhode Island care that faced heinous and demonic acts at the hands of those charged and paid to care and protect and educate us. And what is worse is the fact that many of us told social workers and even the police when we ran away and got picked up that we were being abused, and we were simply taken back and handed over to those abusing us. We were orphans. We were written off as emotionally damaged, manipulative children with severe behavior problems. For over 6 decades, this orphanage was allowed to exploit, rape, abuse, and manipulate a system. To compile all of that, as a man who's 49 years old today, for the last decade, I was told I'm unable to seek justice because I'm bound by an unfair and unjust and, quite frankly, not protective of children law that limits my ability to see justice by 7 years. I ask each of you to consider this. I'm giving you a small glimpse of the pain and torture I faced. I am but one of the survivors, with 6 decades of abuse surrounding them. Hundreds of us are victims, and more so because none of us have had a chance to seek justice. Imagine also, if you will, in the 70s and early 80s, that the acts were being performed were also filmed, stored, and saved. All these years later, there are videos of me and others being abused, and still, even with that evidence, I'm unable to seek justice. My memory of that pain is clear and vivid, and not without consequences. It has and continues to affect me as a man, as a husband, and as a father. I do not like public affection. I do not like being touched. I do not hug my children or offer warm emotional exchanges. Those things are mundane to me. Sex and procreation remains a painful and emotionally traumatizing experience for me. And yet I've managed to create 2 humans with my wife, who for 28 years, which we recently celebrated our anniversary this past weekend, before I came here to tell you my story and to show you who I am and to remind you that we victims are real living people. I faced anal penetration, oral abuse. Can you scroll that a little bit for me?
Yeah.
Petting and fondling. I was filmed in acts against me with adults and role plays with other children for the satisfaction of adults by men and women. Many men have great difficulty admitting this, often leading to decades or more of internal and emotional torture that affect marriages, parenthood, relationships, work skills, and more before we are even remotely ready to face the abusers against us. 7 years is just simply an insult and a further failure of children. The expectation that everyone comes to terms and is ready to face their pain in 7 years is absurd. My wife is the backbone of my family. The very reality that she stands with me is not lost on me, but our relationship faced many hurdles. She never knew my past until we were at least 10 years into our marriage. Yet she remained by my side, voting me, motivating me, and supporting me, and helping me to face my demons. I'm not like most men. I hear that term a lot when it refers to me or my beliefs or how I express myself around my wife and kids, who, make no mistake, I love more than life itself. But hugging and holding and the displays of emotion, those were lacked in my life, stolen, honestly, from those that abused me. So I believe 7 years is just another abuse to us as victims. There are several occasions where I notified people what was going on. Patricia Prada, my social worker, the state police who found me when I was a runaway, Founders School when the state decided to send me to another place out of state. At no time were my complaints or concerns addressed. Instead, I was labeled a problem child, a deviant, an aggressive pre-adolescent. It would honor my fellow victims to let everyone know here that both places where I faced abuse, neglect, and food have been closed, but not because of my story or my pain, because after years of doing this to other children, someone finally investigated and shut them down. Meanwhile, we victims remain unsatisfied and unserved. This passage is more important, not just to me and not just the other victims, but to you, fellow mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, your children and their children. We have a chance here to set Rhode Island as an example for other states to follow. Crimes of sexual abuse, sexual and abusive nature to children should never have a set time frame for them to seek justice and repentance. My almost decade of torture and abuse still today carry a very painful and traumatic vein of existence. It remains a core memory, and while it has not destroyed my ability to live a life, and perhaps aided in my advocacy for very voiceless children still to this day, facing abuse and neglect, it robbed me of my childhood, it stole my innocence, and it created a divide between me and God that to this day is something I still wrestle with. Today, you have a chance to make history, to stand united against the physical, emotional, and sexual destruction of children at the hands of those charged to protect them. By making this step, we can hold accountable predators that stole hundreds of children's lives and send a clear message that we will not tolerate, we will not stand, and we will hold accountable the demons of. There we go. I think there's a second page. Of this world who seek to rob us of our inherent rights to protective, nurturing, and loving environments. It is my great hope to finally have closure in a chapter of my life that I have never had a right I should have, and set a positive working example to other states to follow, so many others can have that same right to seek justice. Thank you for your time, and please pass H7235. Together we can and will make a massive impact on the lives of victims. Let us break the chains of abuse together and make an unmistakable statement to those who abuse children. You no longer have haven. You are subject to face punishment for your crimes, and we will protect and defend victims of child abuse and sexual assault. With your respect, Angela J. Stevens.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, that would have sounded better at the hearing.
But sometimes you're in a situation where you wing it, you know? I mean, wow. So you want to move on to your actual verbal testimony?
Yeah. Again, sounds nothing like the letter.
No, it is what it is, but you still used your voice. You still used your voice to be heard. I mean, this was broadcast publicly, right?
Yes, they live stream all of their hearings.
So this also fell on potentially deaf ears, but it absolutely fell on the ears, even if it's that proverbial just one thing, right? The idea of just one. If it fell on the ears of one person who now wants to use their voice or have, discovered their voice based upon the one, that's enough, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
if we change the minds of one person and one person starts to fight and advocate for it, then we have served a purpose towards protecting children.
And we talked about just trying to create a spark, right? That we to sort of bring it into the community today, as an example, or theoretically, understanding the statistics of women who have been abused, because this is over 90% community is populated by mostly women of a grand scale. The men are few and far between, and that there are women who, for maybe unresolved reasons or for via the power of choice, that will go to these places on the internet that still promote offenders and still they're victims, right? They're promoting certain people, breaking news, so on and so forth. They're supporting people who will promote offenders and leave the victims in the dust, leave them behind, right?
Yeah. And let me expand on that,
please,
because I think I know what you're saying. So, in my opinion, and this is coming from a survivor standpoint, and for those who are also survivors, you can chime in. I think that you would do more education of people against predators by having and interviewing survivors of the abuse that have gained the strength to speak on it, than you would by interviewing a person actively being a predator and a pedophile, in my opinion.
100%. The victim is who needs the promotion, right? We don't need to be promoting. Now we live in this fast-paced, action-sought social media world where it's much more interesting, I'm guessing, to be involved in chats or discussions of hypersexuality or abuse of children, women, men, the elderly, right? It's probably more interesting than to certain people, right? And I don't want to say across the board, but it's much more interesting to hear somebody touch on here or there the sensationalized or the sensationalism of showing the animal, right? That's where the predator hunting and so on and so forth has gained great notoriety, right? Now, with that being said, there is a gentleman in our community, right? This is not hypocrisy. This is applauding the gentleman 606 and Brad Enlow at Crack 40 TV. You don't have to like Brad. You don't have to like 606, but you have to respect. You don't have to love it even. You have to respect the model that they showed us the other day. It wasn't about showcasing a criminal for a catch and release. So as they become more aware of how to navigate the internet and stay away from legal consequence, but that this is a template for how all sensationalized predator hunting should be. And that's that you have a policeman hiding in the bushes. You have a mayor that's going to come down with the cop car and cart the offender off to jail. You should be able to go to the website that houses these criminals' jail roster and look at the actual charges they've been booked for. That is substantial. This is not a catch and release. This is not a one-off. That is where, in my opinion, where it mimics, it can look like sensationalizing an offender or a perpetrator, but in all actuality, what you have is you have someone that's created a model, or at least abiding by a model, in which all of this stuff should go, right?
Yeah, I agree. That should very much be a blueprint for future people that want to, because I don't want to dissuade somebody from being an advocate for catching these people, but that should be a blueprint of what you're using, so that when they do get arrested and they do get charged, that we are able to have those charges stick.
Is some real accountability, right? In the meantime, what happens is that Brad and 606 and Brad, they can bring some awareness to it, right? In a locale, when you have a blueprint like that can actually make an impact, right, in that community, I don't care how large or small it is. Now, you can stretch it tighter over a canvas where you're saying, listen, some people, they're going to troll, or maybe they genuinely advocate for an idea like, yeah, no, that's all great. Why showcase any of it on social media? And I can understand that viewpoint, right? Like, would that be the best possible scenario of all of it? Yes, probably, right? But you're not going to please all the people all the time. So is the best case scenario that you're doing all of this stuff and that you capture a guy, you put him in jail, he's going to face a judge, a jury, and, a sentence, and never bring it for public consumption? That probably is the best case scenario. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to promote it in a way that I can't be completely truthful about it. But the next best thing is that you're going to create a blueprint, and this is where there's the silver lining. You're creating a blueprint, which is now a model that will hold anyone else who thinks they want to do that to a higher standard, right? Don't come on here and just promote offenders and you're not showing any consequence. You're not showing any charges. You're not showing them being carted away in a car by a mayor, right? So that's where, on the flip side, it's important to have these models publicized, right? Because if you keep that in a vacuum, and this is my opinion, if you keep that all in a vacuum to appease someone that says, well, you should be doing that quietly and privately and silently, well, you have so many people here that the trend is the predator hunting stuff, but they're doing it with the wrong model. They're doing it so that they can, and we talked about this, Angelo, it's the delusion. What you're doing is these people are acting, they're live action role playing in a way where they think that they can control the delusion of how they think other people view them. They want to be viewed as a protector of children while promoting offenders and their disgusting, deviant nature, instead of actually putting one in jail, right? They want to be viewed, applauded, and coddled and patted on the back for finding a weirdo that isn't hiding, right? I'm guessing John Goforth probably doesn't have a YouTube where he shows himself half naked, where he's inviting younger children, young girls. Like, this is a no-brainer, right? Anyone, you don't have to be a self-proclaimed predator hunter to go online and find these people who are not hiding. Let's not act like these people are that person was hiding. This person was screaming to be identified and to be promoted, and he got just that. He was promoted on a very small scale. But what we're also going to witness, and I am not a psychic, I am not clairvoyant. We're going to see, now I didn't listen to the disgusting live stream, but I can tell you this, that man is never going to see a day in jail. That's me also probably being a pessimist and a little bit biased to the breaking news. But I'll tell you this, that whole thing was only designed on a whim. There's no real design to it or fabrication of anything substantial. But what it was a design to give someone a pat on the back. Meanwhile, this guy's going to never see a day in jail, right? Do you have anything to add to that point?
I mean, I agree. I think the character of the person conducting the education as it were, plays a pivotal role in how serious that conversation is led and how serious you can take it as a person.
Absolutely. 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 And that we are just in this mainstream media, some of the outlets, and maybe some of you don't know, but maybe some of you do. Maybe some of you are getting ready to be made hip to it. But a lot of times in these situations where there's a public shooter, or even deeper, a school shooter, a lot of times certain outlets will refuse to name the shooter by name. Have you seen that? They refuse to promote the offender because they understand that a little bit of the ideology and the pathology of this person, first they want to hurt people. Somewhere down the line, one of the dynamics is that they want to be identified. They want to be hailed, even if it's in infamy, right? They think they're going to be famous for shooting up a theater in Colorado, but they become infamous, right? And the line between fame and infamy is paper thin, right? It's this thin, and they don't care which way it goes. So I think that we also need to take that same stance here, in that we will refuse to promote an offender, promote the idea of offender or identify an offender unless he's already in jail, like John Goforth, with a $50,000 bond. Great work, 606. Great work, Brad. Moving forward, what we're going to see here is this is Angelo testifying to Congress, correct?
Yes, this was after we listened to the priests, or the priest lawyers, and the entity lawyers that were protecting the interests of, like, the Boys Club, YMCA, St. Mary's, St. Aloysius, etc.
Now let's be very clear here. These priests and upper level religious figures, they're not paying for their own attorneys, are they?
No, the people that donate to the entities are a portion of their donations. I guess it's considered an admin fund. Is used to defend the actions of these individuals.
And at certain times, it wouldn't be crazy to think, Angelo, would it, that this money comes straight from Rome, right? To a degree.
At the end of the day, any of the Catholicisms, the Catholics, it's coming from the Vatican,
which is the appointed leader of that is whatever Pope is in office at the time, right?
Correct. We have high hopes with this Pope. This is an American-raised Pope.
Chicago.
So we do have hopes with this Pope. There has been correspondence between the legal team for us victims and the new Pope, and it tentatively does not look as though they're going to provide a massive defense against what we're trying to do currently, which I'll explain later on, because we're working to remove the statute of limitations entirely.
And I think what also, it's great for all citizenry who have been offended against, but I think that what should automatically come with it is that there should automatically be a clause that if there's an allegation against the Catholic Church, that there's zero statute of limitations for anything that has to do with the church, right? Like that should just have always been a rule, right? Like that's holding the ideal of celibacy to a higher standard, right? Like that should automatically, it should be inferred, right? And that
it should be, but they've given themselves a protection called the entity clause, which precludes victims, even if the statute of limitations is removed. If the entity clause remains in effect, we still are unable to go after the entity. So removing the statute of limitations, removing the entity clause is what we're working on right now.
to even go a little bit further with the ideology of creating a whole, I mean, this is a movement. I'm guessing that we could look it up, but do you know roughly, two questions? Do you know roughly how many people who are devout Catholics are in the world?
I think it's one of the, if not maybe second or third largest religion.
And that understanding with the numbers like that you have to have a priest for all these different churches. It should have been
typically the big ones
part
have
of the design to have that Rome would have its own jail for priests that would commit these sorts of acts.
I don't know the exact design of Rome or the Vatican, but I do know that the Vatican, prior to the Pope that they have now, believed that moving a priest and rehabilitating them, they believe that they could cure through faith and doctrine the behaviors of priests that strayed, in their opinion, strayed from the cloth. I don't know how other victims feel, but as a victim, I don't believe that any of that is repairable. If you're going to abuse children once, I believe that you should be put away for the rest of your life.
Absolutely. And that most, I would go so far as to say, is that most priests that have allegations made against them, the stats probably would show that a priest that is now being identified as a child abuser didn't just get caught with one child. It's an ongoing chronic serial thing, and that there probably isn't any rehabilitation for them, because if you just cut that wolf loose again around a bunch of sheep, all you've done is you've just made him smarter, right?
Yep. And that's demonstratable through the actions of the Vatican with their program, where they move the priest, they give them an intensive treatment, as it were, and then put them in another church, and then the behavior starts all over again in another church. And there's a prime example of that with both Father McIntyre and Father Porter.
Fair enough. So you ready to watch the testimony?
Yes, sir.
I myself have never seen this. And so I'm interested. Like, I just applaud someone for having the courage to come up here in front of what essentially is the nation. Right now, was it seen by the nation? No, but it had the propensity to be seen by the nation. That's the power behind this testimony right here.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. You distinguished yourself. Any questions for the sponsor? Okay, the first two witnesses I like to call, two dear people that I've gotten to know as a result of the many chapters of this saga. Dr. Hub Brennan and Dr. Ian Hagen Webb. Leprade?
Thank you.
I just want to thank you, students from Hope High School, for coming. Thank you very much. Much appreciated your support for Jim Scanlon and all of the victims, and good luck. And survivors, call them survivors.
Okay.
Angelo?
Oh.
Is the red light on?
It is on.
Good. You're on.
Good. I wrote this thing, and then I was listening to everybody talk, and I think it's better to just kind of remember. I grew up in an orphanage called St. Aloysius, for those unfamiliar. I went into state care at 2. I'm 49 today. I spent almost a decade I hate the term being molested. I was raped. Men can get raped, just in case anybody wasn't aware. It's not an easy thing to admit to as a man, especially talking to other men. It's not easy to admit that, your entire life was stolen from you as a child, your innocence, your ability to experience going outside with your friends and playing kickball or baseball. Because I grew up in an orphanage. Didn't get that. In the orphanage, part of your punishment, if you didn't do things that you were supposed to do with these pedophiles and predators, was you didn't get fed, or you didn't get to have clothing. This is in Rhode Island, folks. Rhode Island. I ran away at 7, told my social worker when I got picked up by the state police. Said, hey, these people are doing things. I didn't know what it was at 7 years old. I didn't know what it was called. Didn't have parents. I didn't have allies. And the people that I'm supposed to depend on to protect me weren't there. The orphanage was supposed to protect me. DCF was supposed to protect me. At that time, in those years, CASA was very small and very just getting started. None of those people were there for me. I didn't have that. So what does the state police do when they pick up a runaway? 7 years old, 8 years old. They take them back to the place they ran away from. I don't even know if I can say names. Father McIntyre was the priest I was taken back to. Hey, this guy says you did this stuff. He's just emotionally disturbed. The child doesn't want to be here. To the left of St. Aloysius is a wood line. Down that wood line is an old abandoned well. Father McIntyre's kid took me to that well when the police brought me back and said that that's where I could disappear. 7, 8 years old. Of course I'm going to believe. Well, what the hell am I going to do in a well? I'm going to die. 49 years old. I've never seen one day of justice. I've never had one person outside of a law firm contact me out of the blue one time, ask me what I wanted. And there's going to be arguers who say that this law is not a good idea. This is not a good idea. What's the end game? The end game, ladies and gentlemen, as parents, my son is back there, my wife is back there, is to make it impossible and downright scary to take advantage of children. And you do that by making it the worst possible punishment you can face. I wouldn't care if Father McIntyre was still alive and 99 years old. I want to see him in prison. That seems so cruel. I was in prison. Not that kind of prison. I was in prison of people protecting me, but abusing me. And I never had justice. And these people sit online now. They threatened to call one of my representatives here to try to intimidate me from speaking my truth. We have a chance to make a statement for everybody, for every victim that may come, because it's not going to stop with us, survivors, but it's certainly going to stop with us warriors, because we're going to fight until the day we draw our last breath to ensure that these people face justice, and those people that think of doing it afterwards think twice. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelo. And thank you for coming so far from home to have your voice heard. Appreciate it.
So that's pretty powerful. I don't find it, this is my opinion, I don't find it so vastly different from your initial report. I feel like you just got down to the brass tacks of the situation, right? Now let me do this really quick. when you think about the propensity for the violence and the abuse that they carry out with no punishment, do you, in your heart of hearts, think that these people can be rehabilitated?
No.
So because you're an advocate, you advocate for people that have lost their voice, for have been abused. It would be categorically your ideology that they cannot be rehabilitated.
I do not believe that that is possible. I believe that they've spent years honing their skills in order to continue to get away with it. And if they're not caught, they would continue to do it.
What would you say if someone who was a self-proclaimed child advocate could say, no, because this is the issue. As soon as you say one can be rehabilitated and then you cut them loose on earth again, if they reoffend, even just one of them reoffend against one, it's safe to have the clause in there that, yeah, no, they can't be rehabilitated. So you as an actual advocate who does not promote the offender, your stance is that they can't be rehabilitated. My stance is that they can't be rehabilitated. If I had to bend on that issue, what I would say is that it's not safe. Maybe there is one that can be rehabilitated in someone else's mind, but in my mind, no, they can't be rehabilitated. But I want you to take a look at this here.
Predators don't usually reoffend. Hold on. What?
Whether they rehabilitated or not, but it's the ones that's not being caught, the ones that we don't know about, the evil that we think is afar. It's not. It's right around us. It's hidden in our society, but we don't know what to look for. You know. So when you say it's usually the ones who reoffend and all that, look at the statistics of it.
Wow.
Child predators are usually don't reoffend. Think about it. It's usually new child predators. It's
I
people.
agree with that to an extent. I agree.
They all do. Listen, 99% of them do. What an idiot.
Whether they rehabilitated or not, but it's the ones that's not being caught.
So I guess a self-proclaimed predator hunter says they can be rehabilitated. So who are we, right? Who are we to say they can't be, right?
From a statistical standpoint, I'm going to say that I disagree, because here's why. Father Porter was moved to 7 different locations. Father Porter was 7 times rehabilitated. Father Porter repetitively abused people in all 7 locations. Father McIntyre was in 6 places. Father McIntyre, as the statement from the document shows, credible reports of abuse in all 6 locations. So I do not believe that they can be rehabilitated. What I believe happens is they get educated and become better deviants.
More proficient, more efficient.
More efficient and less likely to be caught. And technology has aided their ability to hide amongst our women, our children, and our livelihoods. And they're protected under a sensationalism of breaking news and making it about trying to educate parents against child abuse. But every case I've seen doing that seems to perpetuate an enjoyment out of the story versus an advocacy for a victim. And that's just me speaking both as a victim and an advocate.
That moves us to, I found this in my travels yesterday, and I want to talk about this by saying that I do believe, oops, hold on one second. Let me refresh really quick.
This is a commercial break. I hope you're
Okay, I'm back.
learning something. There we go. Okay, he's back.
Now, when I said in the clip with him that I said to an extent, I agree. And let me explain how and where I agree. I agree that they don't reoffend when they stay in prison. Most of these guys, let me explain to you. Do you think this guy right here, do you think he's going to reoffend in prison? Probably not. He's going to become the prey. That's where there's the role reversal. And that now I'm not here to tell you that some of these guys don't reoffend in prison. I find it more likely that they're involved in consensual relationships with other men, whether it be men that identify as women, whatever the case is. These guys aren't just the strong arm of the law, and their targets on the outside are soft targets. They're children, right? You put a guy, look at the terror in this man's face. He knows what's getting ready to happen to him over and over and over, unless he lives a life of seclusion in protective custody, right? So this is probably the same eyes that so many children have looked at this man, this very man, with that terror. That's even beyond fear. That is terror, right? Now, this goes on to further substantiate the way that the Catholic Church views these scenarios, right? Now, I think that if you were the Roman Catholic Church as a whole, I think if you had very isolated events of this nature, that it would hit different, right? It would be an extreme situation. Now, I also sort of, I guess, when you say that celibacy wasn't in the Bible and that it was something that was instituted on earth by man, that just as easily as it is instituted, it could be uninstituted, right? And that you could probably have saved countless children. But that being said, right, you remove the whole celibacy clause, and now you open yourself up to a more wholesome religious experience when it comes to the authority that these priests have over children and the fear mongering, right? Now, it says here, almost 1,700 priests and clergy accused of sexual abuse are unsupervised. And associated unsupervised, right? An Associated Press investigation found that those credibly accused are now teachers, coaches, counselors, and also live near playgrounds, which means that they are back. They have went back and found their position of authority over children. Okay. Now, let's go on to say here, nearly 1,700 priests and other clergy members that the Roman Catholic Church considers credibly accused of child sexual abuse are living under the radar with little or no oversight from religious authorities or law enforcement. Decades after the first wave of church abuse scandal roiled U.S. dioceses, an Associated Press investigation has found these priests, deacons, monks, and lay people now teach middle school math. They counsel survivors of sexual assault. They work as now. That is wild to me, to find out that they counsel other people on sexual assault. That's where you really start to identify a level of deviant that I think is crazy to me, because I agree, there's no rehabilitated sex offender that should be counseling other people, and that somewhere inside of their finite mind and existence, they're not excited by hearing these claims. They're not aroused by hearing. They are, right? There's just, you can't even want to hope that they don't. You just automatically say, this guy, he is not, or this gal, they are not qualified to be handling the stories of other SA victims because there's just no way you could feel safe thinking that this issue has been remedied psychologically, right? It says they work as nurses and volunteer at nonprofits aimed at helping at-risk kids. They live next to playgrounds and daycare centers. They foster and care for children. And in their time since leaving the church, dozens have committed crimes, including sexual assault and possessing CP. That's a word I don't want to say because that's not even the correct terminology anymore. It's CSAM. It's child sex assault materials. That terminology, it was changed to CSAM because that terminology, it can be implied that the children partook, right? These are not consensual situations. This is child sex abuse material, right? A recent push by Roman Catholic dioceses across the U.S. to publish the names of those it considers to be credibly accused. What's interesting about that is what you're starting to see here is a push. It doesn't say a movement. It says a push to basically create an intra-Catholic church registry, not of just offenders who have offended, but of those there are credible allegations against, right? I hope that this progresses on to something way powerful, right? Has opened a window into daunting problem of how to monitor and track priests who often were never criminally charged and in many cases were removed from or left the church to live as private citizens. Thus, like a snake in rare form, they're shedding off the allegation and the lack of offender status to remigrate into the world as someone who's never had a claim like this against them, right? Each diocese determines its own standard to deem a priest credibly accused, with the allegations ranging from inappropriate conversations and unwanted hugging to forced sodomy and rape. Dioceses and religious orders so far have shared the names of more than 5,100 clergy members. 5,100. Let's imagine, even for just a moment, in a perfect world, that each one of those 5,100 only had one victim. That's 5,100. If you were to put all 5,100 victims in a church, they'd be standing outside. Then you go on to realize that there's certainly a statistical average of how many clergymen, priests, or whatever actually have. And that you understand that they would be down the street, around the corner, into the next town. It would be miles of victims lined up like this all the way. With more than 3/4 of the names just released in the last year. That tells you that they kept it in a vacuum. They compartmentalized this information, and I'm guessing until there's a crazy public outcry. With more than 3/4 of the names just released in the last year, the AP researched the nearly 2,000 who remain alive to determine whether they have lived and where they have lived and worked. The largest scale review to date of what happened to priests named as possible sexual abusers. In addition to the almost 1,700 that the AP was able to identify as largely unsupervised, there were 76 people who could not be located. What that means is they are not dead. They are not dead. When you're dead, you can be located, right? Within theory, there's going to be a death certificate. There's public records associated to your death. These are people who potentially, I mean, you could theorize, these people have taken on an assumed identity, right? They just cannot be tracked, right? The remaining clergy members were found to be under some kind of supervision, with some in prison or overseen by church programs. The review found hundreds of priests held positions of trust, many with access to children. More than 160 continue working or volunteering in churches, including dozens in Catholic dioceses, overseas, and some in other denominations, right? They're like, hey, forget Catholicism. We're going to take this show on the road to Baptists or whatever the case may be. Roughly 190 obtained professional licenses to work in education, medicine, social work, and counseling, including 76 who, as of August, still had valid credentials in those fields. The research also turns up cases where priests were once again able to prey on victims. In a lot of locales and jurisdictions, right, the charges or the degree of felony, it moves up if the offender has some sort of authority over children, right? It dramatically changes in the potential sentence that this person could be passed down. This moves us to an open letter to the entertainment industry, protecting children from exploitation. Why is this important? This is important because YouTube is what? You'll have these idiots that will be covering hypersexualized material involving children, like Prayer Garden, for instance, right? She's going to tell you that all this is for entertainment purposes only. They're not going to tell you that this here is for criticism, education, and scrutiny, which criticism and scrutiny are the same thing. This is not for entertainment purposes. But so many people who you find are promoting offenders, not identifying victims. They're doing this for entertainment. This is what you coin content. What we are doing today is not content. This is awareness. This is actual awareness, right? So this is an open letter to anyone who claims that they are partaking in front of an audience for entertainment value or for content-based value, okay? As the National Center for Missing and Exploiting Children, NCMEC, protecting the most vulnerable from sexual victimization is a critical part of our mission. For more than 3 decades, NCMEC has witnessed the shocking and appalling sexual abuse of countless children. Sadly, there are people among us who prey upon children for sexual purposes. When film, television, media, and other content creators present children in overtly sexual ways, they are advertently, if that's even a word. Is that a word, Angelo? Advertently?
I mean, you have to be, because inadvertently is just the adjective term of it, isn't it?
I would say so. Inadvertently, normalized. Advertently, there you go. They know what they're doing. Don't get me wrong. People like Breaking News, people like PG, the people in what I agree with another creator who had termed the child sexual community or the Summer Wells community. There's so many weirdos that want to hypersexualize this missing child, which is just absolutely phenomenal, right? But it goes on to say when film, television, media, and other content creators present children in overtly sexual ways, they are inadvertently normalizing this deviant sexual interest in children. Amen? The Netflix film Cuties has created controversy and shocked the public with its hypersexualization of children. This type of sensationalized content, no matter how it's presented, serves to sexualize and desensitize society to the true harm it causes. You cannot get finite minds to think this way. I've been screaming this for years, screaming it for years. Dr. Sharon Cooper, a member of NCMEC's board of directors and a developmental and forensic pediatrician, has studied and written extensively on this topic for many years. Media such as this produced with preteen minors promotes sexually inappropriate and unhealthy behaviors that could ultimately result in their sexual victimization and or exploitation. She commented on the film, "We would advocate for media that provides healthy messages that would never place any children at risk for sexual victimization." Right? Understanding that sexual victimization doesn't have to be a physical thing. It can be an abstract thing, like providing the likeness of a child and then having some weirdo pick it up and grind in their car seat uncontrollably, right? On many occasions, the entertainment industry has played a valuable role by offering constructive social commentary and highlighting the many threats facing our children. However, regardless of intent, any portrayal of a child that objectifies them
or depicts them in an indecent or exploitive way is cause for great concern. We encourage people to learn more about the true harm of child sexual exploitation from NCMEC and other organizations dedicated to the protection of children. We stand against any form of child exploitation and will fight to stop it wherever it's discovered, i.e., YouTube. And that is just the information about the mission statement and organization of NCMEC. This is that link to that page on NCMEC. It's powerful. When you hear the person that sets the standard for what is exploitation, how to identify it, resources and toll-free numbers to call if you are a victim or you know someone who's being victimized. And what is equally and adjacently important to me is that NCMEC is the standard for age progression photos in missing children. That is so powerful. They say that NCMEC is in the 80th percentile or higher when creating these age progression photos. They even ask, and they have publicly asked, please, people, don't use Play Store or Apple apps to recreate photos of children, because you have the one-off chance, and it's widespread, that these apps are going to create a picture that the passersby, the one-off person, will say, oh, okay, well, that's what she looks like. And then they go out and they could actually theoretically miss an opportunity to bring a child home because they've been exposed to an inaccurate age progression photo. Thank you, Dutchie. Okay, moving forward. This brings me to a rather controversial portion of the programming here. Okay. A lot of you probably don't know too much about the inner workings of what you're going to see moving forward here. But a lot of you, especially if you're our age or older, you're going to remember seeing this on live TV. This was effectively, it was street justice that was carried out on a perp walk on live TV, and 20 million people saw it. 20 million. Now, what I'm gonna kind of Tarantino this part. Gary, who is the father of this young boy, right? He took care of business in a street justice fashion in an airport in front of 20 million people while the offender did his perp walk, right? Gary was charged with second-degree murder. That charge was later vacated, and he took a plea for manslaughter and a suspended 7-year sentence. He never did 1 day in jail. Now, people might say, why is this important? Because we've spent a significant amount of time this afternoon talking about the promotion, the literal social media promotion, which NCMEC is against. It desensitizes and sensationalizes the hypersexuality of kids. That there is no sexuality of kids. The hypersexualization and exploitation of kids. It is also equally important, in my belief, that you need to shout out and give flowers to the people who are so staunchly against it. Now, I'm not advocating that anyone rush right out and take the law into their hands like this. And in fact, this boy has been very outspoken since reaching adulthood that he does not advocate for what people like his dad did. However, you cannot ignore that this is the way, this is a slippery slope. This is the way
that offenders need to be viewed, right? Let's take a look.
Shot his son's S-word abuser in the head on live TV. In March 9th, meet Gary Plauché, a Louisiana man who shot his son's S-word abuser in the head on live TV in March 1984. His son Jody was kidnapped and taken to a California motel by Jeffrey Doucette, a man who was Jody's karate instructor, and he was S-word assaulted. Luckily,
he was in a position of authority over children. Okay. That is the crazy theme in all of this, is that there are people who position themselves in authoritative positions over children, and that the main goal for that, the aim and the drive and the motivation to be in this authoritative position, is so that you can prey on children.
police found him 2 weeks later and they arrested Doucette, but Gary wanted revenge for his son's pain. Doucette was flown home to face trial, and Gary was patiently waiting for him in the airport, disguised in sunglasses and a baseball cap. When Doucette walked by, Gary pulled out his handgun, and he did not miss. Live news cameras caught the moment. Doucette fell into a coma and passed away the next day. Gary was initially charged with second-degree murder, but he never served a day in prison. He pled no contest to manslaughter and was given a 7-year suspended sentence instead. In an interview, Gary said he did not regret ending Doucette's life and would do so again. He's still seen as a hero to many parents today. Follow me for more true crime stories.
Do you have an opinion on that, Angelo?
Probably would have done the same thing. He saved his state millions of dollars in appeals. He saved probably more than that in just the time it would have been to put him in prison, assuming he went to prison, which is another problem I have with the justice system. A lot of these predators seem to get slaps on the wrist because the judges and the system is taught to believe by doctors that these people are rehabilitative, and I firmly disagree. And here's the reason why. I'm going to say one reason why. We do not have the luxury as human beings and parents to get the protection of our children wrong. If there is even a remote 0.0001% chance that this person can do it again, they need to stay in prison.
Absolutely. And I think that, and I misspelled photos, sorry about that. As a side note, as creators, let's all please refrain from creating age progression photos. They're not helpful. They are not helpful. Please refrain from taking these photos of these children and putting them to apps that will make them sing or their faces move. Do not do that. Don't do that. That's not helpful. Now, I think that there are, I don't want to call them third world countries, but there are countries whose judicial system is much different than what we experience here. And there are a lot of countries that if you are found to be, and I'm not talking about Sharia law. Sharia law is not what we're talking about here. No, we won't say that again. Countries where child sex abuse is looked upon as a death sentence, right? That those countries are probably onto something, right? If you, I mean, there's laws for everything, and there's laws that actually are effective, and then there's laws that aren't so effective, and that I don't know what the yearly stats are, how they go up or they go down in terms of reported child abuse, sex abuse, but it doesn't seem to be effective, and that we have a crazy outcry for the leniency in the system for people that that offend against children, right? I mean, there should be a set standard, right? If you want to venture off into that realm, you want to even put one foot in the pool of child sexual abuse, doesn't matter, like if it's unwanted touching, you're gone, right? You're gone. Yeah. Release the pot smokers and lock up all the people who think that they can do things to women, men, and children. And then in 10 years, some of these people in 10 years, they're off the registry, right? I mean, that's crazy. We have a gentleman that was in the community, rap. love him or hate him, whatever remember the good times. But he took a plea for sexual battery. And it's not for me to argue the details of his case. That's not for me to do. But what I can say is that in 10 years, he'll be off the registry. Do I agree with that? I believe once you make the cut, you're just there, right? It is what it is. Now, moving forward, do you want to, it brings us to James Porter. Do you want to give us a little, information about how James Porter, what is your experience in regards to James Porter?
So when St. Aloysius would go to camp for spring or summer, depending on what it was overseen by Father Porter. Actually, I should say former Father Porter. So Father Porter, prior to being in Attleboro, was also in other locations where allegations of sexual misconduct and sexual abuse against girls and boys took place. It was alleged originally that he only had 28 victims, but he actually had 130 something victims across the span of his 30 or 40 years of running either his church or the campground. And the campground had specific locations where the abuse would take place, away from other staff. In this instance, in this campsite thing, not all the staff were aware at the time of what was going on. So those people were kept at arm's length as far as the inner workings of what took place. Because Father Porter, like Father McIntyre, would invite other predators to come. I mean, he basically pimped out the kids and participated.
It's like a sexual retreat for outsiders.
Yeah. And we're talking about high profile people. We're not just talking about the 9 to 5 Joes. We're talking about, city officials, cops, judges, lawyers. Like there were high ranking people that were taking place in both of these men's extracurricular activities that were taking the innocence of children away. And, some of these children have gone on to become predators themselves. And while my heart goes out to them for their victim status, I would be doing a disservice to victims if I didn't advocate that they should be in jail for the rest of their lives for doing what they did. Of all the people that should know better, it should be a victim. When a victim decides to still become a predator, while I agree that there's a mental health aspect to it, you still cognitively have a choice to make. You can become a predator, or you can become an advocate or a survivor or a voice against it. You still have a choice to make, and they chose wrong.
Yeah. I think that unfortunately, this is a conversation. It looks as if the Catholic Church is mainly responsible for, but this is a conversation that it looks as if will never stop. I mean, you can't ever have a realistic expectation that you're going to eliminate crimes against children ever, right? In the general public. But when you think of, well, when I step into a church, I'm in a more holy realm, and that the people that are here, they identify that they're sinners, and that we are led and we choose to follow the word of the Bible, right? As it's interpreted to us by priests, reverends, preachers, so on and so forth, right? And that you should be able, as a human being, you should have the realistic expectation that no church official should ever offend against a child, right? Should be able to have that expectation. Now, that brings me to a question that just ran through my mind, Angelo. Are you aware if this is just a American Catholic issue, or is this a worldwide Catholic issue? Like, is this a problem in Rome? Is this a problem in Mexico? Like, or is this just an Americanized Catholic issue?
I still believe it's worldwide, but I believe that this country tends to cover it up more than other countries do. I think some other countries have taken a harder stance against it, but it's worldwide. I think if we as a nation start holding the churches accountable by removing their 501c3 tax exempt statuses for allegations of sex abuse, then maybe the Vatican will start taking it more seriously. But that would mean that we have that would mean that we have to have a government that stands up for victims, and I don't see that happening right now either.
And it's sick that that a reasonable theoretical way to change the course of what's going on in the Catholic Church is to attack the money. Right? That's essentially what it is. Like, to change it, you're attacking the money, and that will all of a sudden be the wake-up call. Right? When in fact, I think you're exactly right that the immense amount of revenue that's generated through the Catholic Church. I mean, theoretically, if you go to the Catholic Church down the street and you put a $20 bill in the plate, it trickles up.
Oh yeah,
theoretically, right?
Up first before back down.
Absolutely, it's trickled up, it's thrust up, and then it's the disbursement. It happens in a different kind of way, but all of these things are tax free.
Yes.
Right.
One thing I have to mention, because if I don't, my wife will remind me and then I'll kick myself for not doing it. So during the course of the investigation with Rhode Island, they got a search warrant for Father McIntyre's house, and that's where they uncovered the videos and all that fun jazz. And after the testimony at the State House, my phone rang, and it was one of the lawyers for the Catholic Diocese in Rhode Island. And they were talking to me and my wife, and basically my testimony, my private testimony that was given to the police for the warrant for Father McIntyre's house, they asked me to go over it again. So I verbalized it over the phone, and it was hard. My wife's sitting here crying. They offered me money if I would sign an NDA and not discuss the case anymore. And this was prior to the book, just so you know.
This is you understanding that you may never get a suitable threshold of justice from your situation, but you're definitely not going to take the money.
No. And it's not even about the money. It's about holding the people accountable. The state needs to be held accountable. The county needs to be held accountable. The town needs to be held accountable. That place should be shut down and never operated by the Catholic Diocese ever again. And after my testimony, we drove to St. Aloysius, and guess what? Guess what we found out?
What's that?
It's reopened under the same Catholic Diocese as an all-girls home for wayward children. Even after all of this stuff. So $100,000, it could be $100 million. The money is dirty. It's blood. It's on the backs and innocence of children.
So
the only thing that it would be useful for is to give it to organizations that actually help children.
That fight against the bigger problem.
The fight against child trafficking, like this agency that you showed earlier.
Wow. So that's heavy, right? Like
when they want you to sign an NDA, that tells you everything.
I think that is so. I mean, that is like a glaring. Like, I don't even, the word escapes me. Like, to to, as a church, have a process where you are going to buy people's silence so that it's not brought out and leveraged against the church, right?
Bingo. This was all about protecting the church. They missed the entire premise of what it is our testimony was doing. We're not here to protect the church. You should have thought about that before you were abusing children.
Well, actually, in a way, though, on the flip side of the conversation, in a way, by removing these offenders from the church, you actually are protecting the legacy and the integrity of the church as a whole, right? Like, once you outcast all of them and you're like, okay, I think we got rid of all the roaches, the kitchen's safe, right? It actually is in the long game, you are protecting the church by speaking out and getting rid of these people and locking them up or excommunicating them, whatever they decide to do, right? You are actually protecting the legacy and integrity of said establishment, right?
That's the byproduct. The main objective is the protection of children.
Exactly. It's not they didn't go in with that aim, but that's just by proxy what happens.
Yeah.
Wow. So I have another kind of like Mr. Gary Plache. It's a gentleman here in Texas, and he is currently in jail for an action much the same. But it's a little bit different. Now, understanding that in certain states, I don't know which one, and my mind is just, I'm way out there right now. There's states where it can either be imposed upon you for chemical castration, or an offender can actually. There's been offenders in the past that they've elected to be chemically castrated. Let me actually pull this up really quick. Okay. This is a list. Several U.S. states have laws allowing or requiring chemical castration, typically aimed at repeat sex offenders or those who commit crimes against children, while some states offer it as a voluntary option to expedite parole. What that means is to get off parole quicker, to be back to being a free U.S. citizen, you can say, listen, chemically castrate me, and then I'm good to go. I'm off paper. I'm just on the registry. I'm on the computer. I got a red dot on my house. All of those things the court imposes on you. This would expedite you getting off, right? Others mandate it. States that authorize chemical castration include Alabama, California, Florida, Georgia, Iowa, Louisiana, Montana, Oregon, Texas, and Wisconsin. Rules, cost, and whether the treatment is voluntary or mandated vary greatly by jurisdiction. For example, Alabama requires convicted offenders to pay for their own treatment, while Louisiana also allows judges to sentence certain offenders to surgical castration. Surgical. That's a short list. Moving forward. This brings us to this gentleman. To me, the bookend photo, the mugshot says it all, right? This is a man who you can tell by the look on his face right now. What do they say? Pardon my French. Zero fucks given, right? Let's listen to the story.
This man has been arrested in Texas, and I'm just going to say this right off rip. Free my boy. This dude shot a chomo right in the deal. The dude that he shot had been trying to lure little kids off of a playground, and he'd been saying sexual shit to them. Well, he tried that with his niece, and oh boy, he just wasn't having it. As an uncle, this dude just did what any good uncle would do. That dude was clearly trying to use his to hurt kids, so he disarmed him by shooting him in the deal. This man has been arrested in Texas.
I think that you can find story after story after story And I think that depending on if you if you are someone that lives in victim status, or you live a life of identifying that you're a victim, whether you've worked through that trauma or not, that this certainly it's a silver lining inside of a system that should be doing more, right? Again, I'm not here. I don't take the same stance as JD. I don't agree that we ought to just be running around shooting people in the groin or popping them on the perp walk, because there was one person in the Gary Plache story, someone that actually was that adhered to the ideology, but he said, you know what I would have done? I would have gut shot him 3 or 4 times and make him suffer, right? I think that when you look at the longevity of the punishment, there's the immediate gratification of, well, this scenario is different, but in the Plache, and there's so many other stories like the Plache story, that you've gotten a instant gratification from deleting them from the earth. However, what you've taken away is the years and years and years of punishment that the Department of Correction can put on them. Also, whatever perceived extra punishment goes on within the prison, whether it's a prison within a prison, or it's a prison where, they have to deal with the intra prison politics, whatever it is. Again, I don't advocate for this, but I understand how these situations might offer a little hope, right? You have any comment on this one here?
I mean, give the guy a medal and a job.
He needs a 401k and
a nice fat severance package and a savings plan, whatever. Yeah, I'm the type of guy that, if I was going to do that, I'd be dipping my bullets in cow manure and then loading it. I mean, I want them to suffer as much as I know the victim suffered, and I know the victim suffered because I know how I suffered, and mine's. Everybody suffers differently. I get that, but it's still suffering.
I did not know that, Fleece. That's
when
probably
when you say JD, you mean JD like the vice president JD?
No, JD Delay.
Delay.
Yeah. Yeah. I've it's right here. So, in closing,
there's no give. If you abuse children, you deserve whatever happens to you. And if it's prison, you don't deserve to get out. That's just how I feel.
Hooah. Yep. So there, I guess in closing, it seems like a very sophisticated situation, but I think throughout the course of this stream, Angelo and I have identified ways that you could really streamline this situation as it regards the Catholic Church. I think that once you move outside of the Catholic Church, the parameters are different, in that you're not. It's not operating under. It's not operating under the clause of everything holy, and that God is not less connected to the general citizenry, but certainly you want to believe that there is a higher connected vibration in a church, right? And that the conversation it cannot be bought off with NDAs and checks from Rome. It can't be these things. You can't bring victims to Congress to tell their story and advocate for themselves and every other victim of SA, and that you can't set them up by allowing the defenders of the offenders to speak first and set the stage. You don't reopen historic facilities that have widespread sexual abuse over decades. You don't reopen these facilities. limit the statutes for there just is a foreverdom, right? If it happened to you when you were 2, or it happened to you when you were 22, or there's nothing that limits a victim's voice or their hunt for justice. So
I agree. And the states need to stop holding these entities accountable. If you have viable evidence that shows that these entities are deliberately hiding, masking, or moving these child predators to protect themselves and not protect the children, then their statuses need to be removed. Once you start hitting that pocketbook, you'll find the Vatican starts to respond that much quicker.
Yep. Well, I do thank you for joining us and having the courage to speak about these things. And if, I feel secure in knowing that walking away from this podcast that we definitely, I think, have done what the mission statement for this stream was. And it was just to create a spark in the people that are around these communities. Some are victims themselves. I think that there's also proof of concept that there are people like Arctic Fox. There are other people who are inviting offenders into the community, or at least what people that look to be good as an offender, inviting them into this community. I don't want to rub shoulders with anyone who thinks that hypersexualizing children on any level is okay. Like, I don't want nothing to do with them. And there are so many under all of these little silly avatars and silly names. No offense to anyone that has a silly avatar or a silly name, but when you stand up for a principle like allowing someone to think as a creator that the hypersexualization of a child is okay to do, even privately, but let alone publicly, and that this is some kind of way outside of the parameters that even NCMEC has identified. They identify, and it said content creators. You don't, and that's TikTok, that's YouTube, that's Instagram, that's anywhere someone has an influence over 2 or more people, right? When you have an influence over 2 or more people and you're involved in the hypersexualization of children, what you're doing is actually desensitizing people to it. And that's the delusion, right? And we spoke about this before, the delusion of thinking that your behavior in front of a camera is going to dictate the way you believe people are seeing you. I don't care. No offense. I love all of y'all individually. I don't care how any of you view me, right? The ones that I'm close to and that I have a regular dialogue with, yeah, of course, the human dynamic, right? The human dialogue. But the people that I don't know and the people that don't, I don't care if I've never spoken with you and you've never come over here and you've never engaged in an intelligent conversation. I don't care what you think about me. But there are people here that hypersexualize children and that are on this crazy train of trying to make sure that they think in their delusional mind they can control how people see them on the refract, right? No. That's absolutely delusional. And the fact that you would use children as the fodder, hypersexualizing children as the fodder to control, it's like being a fireman that's starting a fire that you're going to be called to, you think in your mind to put out, right? That is absolutely, that is even more insane than doing the same thing, expecting the same circumstance, right? We know that loosely the ideal of insanity is doing repetitious behavior, expecting a different outcome. That's not this. What you are witnessing is the same behavior, expecting the same outcome, and finding that outcome entertaining. So, do you have any comments, questions, concerns, burning desires, anything that you want people to walk away with?
I just appreciate you giving me a chance to speak for the victims, and maybe give people a little bit of insight into me. I'm a hard person to get along with, I guess, but you know, it's always been about, for me, giving a voice back to the voiceless, to the children that don't have the luxury of being able to speak out, to the children that have just been forgotten. If you look at my logo, just to give kind of an idea, this logo for everything I do, it looks like a faceless person. That's what we were. And inside that faceless person is this light trying to come back in. You want to call it God, faith, religion, spirit, or whatever. But this is a representation of how I felt. And it was the perfect symbol to produce what I've produced. And I stand with the children. We don't have the luxury of getting wrong. It doesn't matter if we like each other. We have to protect our children. YouTube's not going to do it. Police aren't going to do it. The government's not going to do it. We have to do it. We have to do it by standing on the same foundation. No child should be abused, period.
No, I agree. I'm dropping here in the chat something. It's another story of an offender. What was the sheriff there in Kentucky? Mickey. I know somebody will give it to us. The sheriff there, that I think that his trial is going to start pretty soon. He killed a judge for allegedly having done something to his daughter, and then a lot of different claims have come out about the judge.
Is that the Judge Steins in Kentucky?
There you go. That's it. Deputy Mickey something or other.
Sheriff Steins.
Yeah. Sheriff. I'm sorry, Sheriff Mickey Steins. There you go. Killed by father. This story is especially interesting because it appears to be a man who killed his daughter's kidnapper and molester, ran for sheriff, and had his charges dropped in Arkansas. So, hey, it still works some places, right? It's still a thing. It's still a thing.
Like I said, until we start taking it seriously, like we keep slapping these people on the wrist, putting them in jail, thinking. And I don't believe in the castration thing either, because Father McIntyre was impotent. He didn't get an erection, and he was still molesting children. So,
wow.
I think it's a thing in your mind, in your heart. And before people think I'm against religion, I'm not. I'm not against religion. God doesn't make bad people. Bad people are bad because they choose to be bad. God gave us free choice. We choose to be good. We choose to be bad. He's not going to intervene on our choices. That's why we have free choice. We will answer when we die.
Absolutely.
There's no avoiding that.
Okay, well, Mr. Angelo, happy Flag Day. Yesterday was Flag Day. Thank you for joining us. And, I hope that we've created not only we've created a space for an old dialogue that should always be remembered. Not only that, but we've created an expectation. Hopefully we've created a new expectation for what we would require over people that are in the same space as us, who consistently on a regular basis hypersexualize children for either their gratification or the gratification of their audience. Like, there's some people out. I'm one of those people. I'm going to talk about here what I want to talk about. I seldom, rarely am going to gear a podcast towards what I think everyone else wants to hear. But I certainly, because of moral, religious beliefs, ethical beliefs, who I am as a man, not going to come here and have a dialogue about hypersexualizing children, let alone have it regularly, and that I've actually found a group of people who also want to hear me talk about it, right? Like, what the? So that's really all I have. Again, I appreciate.
Thank you for giving a victim a voice.
Absolutely, sir.
I mean, I can't thank you enough, dude. I really can't. And if you see something, say something, folks. Don't keep it to
Absolutely.
yourselves.
Yep. Well, I thank you.
And I hope you have a great 4th of July, bud.
Thank you. And I'm sure I'll talk to you again before then. But Miss Viper, you have a lovely rest remaining part of your Sunday. Yeah, that's it, folks. So I'm going to go ahead. Yep, there he goes. Say something, see something. Don't be afraid to use your voice. Don't wait until it's too late. And then you say, hey, damn, I wish I'd have used this voice, right? Don't do it. Anyways, yeah, please hit the like button. You guys know I don't ask for that very often, but hit the like button because as I understand, it affects the algorithm. And we know about the phenomenon and the dynamics of this online competition and watching from the bushes. Somebody has had their head cracked today to the way it's supposed to be, right? Even if it's just one. I do want to thank Act Right for her contribution early on. Thank you, Queen. I know you didn't hear me. It's turned off, but I don't know how to turn all that other stuff off. So we will get hip. Anyways, again, thank you all for joining us. Yeah, I hope we hit the mark. I feel confident that it opens up a dialogue. Now, Angelo also understood that going anywhere, right, with weirdos that hypersexualize everything, he understands. To him, it's worth the risk of understanding that, people involved or that orbit the problem, that they're going to probably take this and, do wild, unimaginable things with his testimony and with his voice, right, as a victim. So thank you, Dutchie. I sure appreciate it. If anyone needs to contact me, you can reach me at benlindsay94@gmail.com. Hey, Ash, good to see you, baby. Happy belated birthday again to Rapper. So that's it, guys. I love all of y'all individually. Remember, the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. Have a great Sunday.